I need to tell you about what just happened at the Supreme Court yesterday. This is one of the most humiliating moments I've seen in Trump's entire presidency. All 9 Supreme Court justices, including the 3 Trump himself appointed, just completely destroyed his attempt to fire a Federal Reserve governor. And I mean destroyed. We're talking Brett Kavanaugh, his own guy, warning Trump that what goes around comes around. If you're new here, I'm Jordan Vale, and we're building a community of people who actually pay attention to this stuff. We need people like you here, so hit that subscribe button. All right, here's what happened. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard arguments in Trump's attempt to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. Trump announced on Truth Social last August that he was firing her, claiming she committed mortgage fraud before joining the Fed. She sued, lower courts blocked it, and now it's at the Supreme Court. And let me be clear about what's really happening here. Trump wants to control interest rates. Lisa Cook has consistently voted with Fed Chair Jerome Powell to keep rates steady. Trump wants them lower so the economy looks better before the midterms. That's what this is actually about. Now, the Federal Reserve was created over 100 years ago to be independent from political pressure. Governors serve 14-year terms and can only be removed for cause, meaning serious misconduct, not policy disagreements. If presidents can just fire Fed governors whenever they want, the Fed becomes a political tool. You get artificially low rates before elections, then inflation, then economic chaos. So Trump's lawyer, Solicitor General John Sauer, goes before the court and argues that Trump can fire Fed governors for cause without any judicial review, without a hearing, with Trump alone deciding what counts as cause. Watch what happens when the justices start asking questions. This is Brett Kavanaugh, Trump's own appointee, absolutely demolishing this argument.
There's a balance struck here. This is not a ironclad, you can never be removed. There is a cause removal authorization.
But on that, your position that there's no judicial review, no process required, no remedy available, very low bar for cause that the president alone determines, I mean, that would weaken, if not shatter, the independence of the Federal Reserve that we just discussed.
I mean, did you hear that? Kavanaugh just told Trump's lawyer that his position would weaken, if not shatter, Fed independence. That's Trump's own Supreme Court justice saying this would destroy one of our most important institutions. But here's where it gets even better. Kavanaugh doesn't stop there. He keeps going with this warning about what happens next.
Let's talk about the real-world downstream effects of this, because if this were set as a precedent, it seems to me, just thinking big picture, what goes around comes around. All the current president's appointees would likely be removed for cause on January 20th, 2029, if there's a Democratic president, or January 20th, 2033. And then we're really at will removal. So what are we doing here?
What goes around comes around. Kavanaugh is literally telling Trump that if this precedent stands, the next Democratic president will fire every single Trump appointee on day one. He's pointing out that Trump is destroying the very protections that could shield his own people. And when Sauer tried to dismiss this as just a policy argument, Kavanaugh fired back that history is a pretty good guide. Once these tools are unleashed, they get used by both sides, and usually more the second time around. This wasn't just Kavanaugh. All 9 justices piled on. Let me show you.
So just a meeting across the conference table finished with "you're fired"? I mean...
Neil Gorsuch, another Trump appointee, asked if Trump's process was just a meeting across a conference table finished with "you're fired," his old reality TV catchphrase. Gorsuch is mocking him. Amy Coney Barrett, also appointed by Trump, asked Sauer directly, if there isn't anything to fear from a hearing, and if you have the evidence, why couldn't resources have been put into a hearing? She's calling out the fact that they rushed this without following any proper process. Even Samuel Alito, one of the most conservative justices, questioned why everything was handled in such a hurried manner and in such a cursory way. Chief Justice Roberts appeared skeptical of the fraud claims themselves, noting that evidence in the record actually contradicts what the administration is alleging. He asked whether what Sauer said applies in the case of an inadvertent mistake contradicted by other documents. And Justice Sotomayor pointed out that Cook had bank permission to rent her Michigan home and shared her own experience moving for the court. She renovated her apartment thinking she'd be in New York for the rest of her life, but things change. People move. That's not fraud. According to NPR's reporting, in a spirited argument that lasted more than 2 hours, all 9 justices expressed doubts about Trump's claim of absolute power to fire Fed board members. That's unanimous skepticism, 9-0. Now here's what makes this even more dramatic. Sitting in the Supreme Court gallery during these arguments was Jerome Powell, the Fed chair himself. He was watching this case because he knows he's next. Trump appointed Powell as Fed chair back in 2018. Now Powell's term as chair ends in May, but he can stay on as a Fed governor until 2028. And Trump wants him gone because Powell won't lower interest rates on command. Just 11 days ago, Powell said the Justice Department is investigating him for allegedly lying to Congress about the Fed's building renovation. Powell called this a pretext and said the threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Fed setting rates based on what will serve the public rather than following presidential preferences.
The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
So Powell is sitting there in that courtroom, watching the justices decide whether Trump can do to him what Trump is trying to do to Cook. If Trump wins this case, Powell is next. If Trump loses, Powell is protected. And it gets better. Also sitting in the gallery was Ben Bernanke, former Fed chair. 3 former Fed chairs, Greenspan, Bernanke, and Yellen, filed a brief warning that allowing this would destroy Fed independence and lead to economic catastrophe. They wrote that this is how monetary policy is made in emerging markets with weak institutions, with highly negative consequences for inflation. This is the first time in the Federal Reserve's 112-year history that a president has tried to fire a Fed governor. Think about that. Over a century of presidents dealing with Fed decisions they didn't like, and not one of them tried this. Now I need to tell you about Sauer's performance because it was terrible. NPR reported that Sauer spoke over the female justices so often that Chief Justice Roberts had to step in and tell him to stop. Think about that. The Chief Justice of the United States had to intervene because Trump's lawyer wouldn't stop interrupting female Supreme Court justices. That kind of courtroom behavior is extraordinary, and it certainly looks like Sauer knew he was losing badly. So where does this go from here? The court appears certain to block Trump's firing attempt. They'll probably issue some kind of temporary order protecting Cook while the case continues in lower courts. Trump is going to rage about this on Truth Social. He'll call it judicial activism, even though it's 9-0. Right-wing media will probably go after Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Barrett, calling them rhinos or deep state or whatever. But here's what really matters. Fed independence is being protected. The Supreme Court is drawing a line and saying, no, you cannot seize control of the institution that sets interest rates for the entire American economy. And Trump's own appointees are the ones saying it. That's what makes this so devastating for him. These are people he put on that court specifically to have his back. And when it came down to it, they chose institutional independence over loyalty to him. Kavanaugh's warning was the key moment. What goes around comes around. He's telling Trump that if you blow up these norms, if you turn the Fed into a political weapon, the next president will use that same weapon against you. This is a pattern we need to watch. Trump keeps trying to seize control of independent institutions, the Fed, the Justice Department. He's going after anyone who won't do exactly what he demands, and increasingly, even his own appointees are pushing back. Now, this fight isn't over. Trump's attack on Powell will continue. The DOJ investigation is still happening. Trump may try other ways to pressure the Fed through public attacks or investigations. But yesterday was a major defeat. The Supreme Court just told Trump that there are limits. that Fed independence matters, that he can't just fire people because they won't manipulate interest rates for his political benefit. And his own justices delivered that message. Let me know what you think in the comments. Are you surprised Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Barrett turned on Trump like this? Do you think the court will actually follow through and block the firing? And what do you think happens to Powell next? If this video helped you understand what's happening with the Fed and why it matters, hit that like button and share it. We're trying to build something real here, a community that actually pays attention when authoritarians try to seize control of our institutions.
Thanks for spending a few minutes digging into this with me. If you want more grounded, progressive commentary without the outrage bait, subscribe and stick around. Every time you watch, share, and engage, it helps build a community that believes democracy is worth understanding and defending. I'll see you in the next video.